In Toronto's Hyde Park, people are gathering for a unique musical performance. Something involving these. Mushrooms. They're not the magic kind, but they will enhance the mood.
In mushrooms, you just never know what you're gonna get. Sometimes you plug in and they're going nuts, and sometimes nothing happens for minutes, and then it will just go crazy again.
It's a fungi feature. And the conductor of this earthy orchestra is Tun Nyer, a trained biologist and working musician who harmonizes his passions, plugging into whatever he finds growing outside his home in the northern Gulf Islands of British Columbia.
In the Pacific Northwest, fall is the time for mushrooms, and I was like, might as well plug into a mushroom.
And that's exactly what he does. Sending a small electric current through the mushroom, the changes in resistance are converted into various rhythms and melodies on his synthesizer.
Everything around us has electrical properties, and you can use the fluctuations in the electrical properties of the organic world to inform art and conversation.
He's played around with hundreds of mushrooms over the last couple of years and learned a lot more about them, in no small part because of one of his neighbors.
I mean, I never thought of that.
If mushrooms are the instruments, Paul Stammitz is their maestro. A self-described citizen scientist who's been fascinated by fungi for over 40 years.
Mushrooms are like miniature biochemical factories. Some can feed you, some can heal you, some can kill you, some can send you on a spiritual journey.
He shot to fame for being a proponent of psilocybin, the magic in those magic mushrooms. But his work on the non-psychedelic powers of mushrooms is just as mind-blowing, like how mushrooms can protect bee colonies.
The mycelium helps the immunity of the bees to fight viruses.
And Paul believes mushrooms have otherworldly capabilities too. He's working with NASA to see if fungi can create healthy soil out of the asteroid dust on Mars. While they have potential in space, mushrooms are deeply rooted in the earth. If you were to lift up the forest floor, you'd find their roots, mycelium, everywhere. Small white threads spreading out like spider webs, providing an important network for plants and trees, communicating where food and water can be found, a kind of ecological internet.
It's these fine threads that are under every footstep that you take, up to hundreds of miles. They are part of the immune system of our planet.
Even though we consume them like vegetables, fungi are not plants or animals or bacteria. They exist as their very own kingdom. There are more than 1.5 million species out there, yet only 10% have actually been identified. Canadian farmers are having a field day. Sales have mushroomed 20% since 2018. Patty Smith, co-founder of Whistler Harvest, has a front row seat to the fungi frenzy.
You've seen the demand for them grow, so to speak?
We cannot grow enough or keep enough on the shelves because it just goes so quickly.
Patty grows most of his mushrooms indoors, but some can only be obtained in the wild. That's where Patty's partner, Paul Kane, comes in.
Definitely secretive. You won't find many people willing to share their spots.
I've never foraged before and figured this was as good a time as any.
How do you know what you're looking for?
I was taught at a very young age to learn to identify the trees opposed to actually look for the mushrooms on the ground.
So instead of looking down?
Yeah, look up. And if you learn to identify what mushrooms associate with the different tree species, you'll have a lot more success. Right here, growing on this mountain hemlock, is what's called chicken of the woods, or the sulfur shelf mushroom. And this is a choice edible, widely consumed by households, chefs. Absolutely love this mushroom.
There are so many varieties on our plates these days, but the versatility of mushrooms goes well beyond the kitchen. Some can actually help the planet recover from eco-disasters.
Mycelium eats oil, and then it can transform it into something that's nutritious.
To see that process in action, we went to northern BC, where residents here in Hazelton are testing out mushrooms on a long-standing problem involving salmon and the railroad. Canadian National Railway runs through this vital fish habitat known as the Skeena watershed.
The Skeena is BC's second largest salmon watershed, and it's just over 54,000 square kilometers, which is bigger than Switzerland.
Shannon McPhail is co-executive director of the Skeena Watershed Conservation Coalition.
It has all 5 species of wild salmon. We also have the largest strain of wild steelhead in the world.
But that ecosystem is threatened because of a chemical found in the rail ties, creosote, a toxic substance that's been used since the 1800s to preserve the wood. When ties wear out, they're removed from the tracks and piled beside the railway by the thousands, sometimes for decades, where the chemicals can leach into the soil.
They just leave them there. The only time they remove them is either they're going to bring them elsewhere to bury them or burn them. And that just adds to the problem. It doesn't cure the problem.
Chief Nemox is the hereditary chief for the Wet'suwet'en. He says it's the duty of his people to protect the Skeena watershed.
We don't have major development on our rivers. It is pristine. We can drink out of our rivers, out of our creeks, out of our lakes, and we've ensured that. There are not many places on this planet you could do that.
The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency has identified creosote as a carcinogen that may pose risks to fish and invertebrates.
I read all these case studies where they used oyster mushrooms to clean up oil or diesel or other fossil fuel spills in the ground, and then you were able to eat the mushrooms after. It was really, really interesting, and that kind of blew my mind. And I thought that can't actually work, can it?
Shannon's coalition set out to investigate, teaming up with farmers Chris Zazula and Martin Hummel to test the theory.
Oh, wow.
Mycelium can be trained to eat certain kinds of wood. In this case, pieces of rail ties.
You have a bit of railroad tie, and then we'll took little pieces off it, and then put it on the petri dish, put the mycelium culture on it.
We tried elm oysters, turkey tail, artist conch, chicken of the woods.
The victorious mushroom was turkey tail. It consumed the creosote, converting it back into its non-toxic base elements.
We need to do a lot more testing, but what we know at the start is that the worst we can do is we can make these very toxic railway ties significantly less toxic.
An exciting first step. Now the next one is testing it on a much larger scale, moving from the petri dish to the piles of ties, and that requires the cooperation of CN Railway.
We'd love CN to come in as a partner and actually help deal with this, because their toxic legacy in this region needs to shift.
Shannon says CN has been contacted, but so far has not agreed to any further development with the remediation project. CN did not respond to Global News' request for comment.
And the frustrating part is, we shouldn't have to depend on a nonprofit small organization in Hazelton to have to do this work, but this is our home.
From nature's cleaner to foraged music to tabletop, there's a mushroom cloud of possibilities on the horizon, and new reasons to elevate those little forest dwellers beneath our feet.
Yay!
Mushrooms have become the zeitgeist of our time. Mushrooms check every box in bringing people together in community, sharing their ancestral knowledge. Also, it's exciting. Mushrooms are colorful, they're beautiful, they're mysterious. they're fun. After all, the first 3 letters of fungi is fun.